I saw something that appeared to be some sort of a hostage exchange or prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine. I don't know how real that is. I do know this. We've got to get with Brent Sadler. He is a senior research fellow, naval warfare and advanced technology, heritage.org. Brent, how are you? Good to see you again, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on. Yeah, things are busy. The world is definitely interesting.
Yeah, well, it's in flux, and I think that's a good thing because President Trump is ending wars. This one isn't ended, though. He wanted to end that even before he became president. Was there a prisoner exchange? Is that some sort of a sign that we're on the right path here?
I wouldn't read too much into any prisoner exchanges that are going on. The Ukrainians and the Russians have done that from time and again. Sometimes it's part of negotiations, but both sides have been doing this since very early on in the war.
It's interesting because Putin shows up, and I think it's a major power play by Trump. Makes him come to our country, makes him come to a state that we basically got for pennies on the dollar, and it's rich with all sorts of resources. It's a place he'd love to still call Russia. He looked like the little brother, in my opinion. Got a B-2 bomber flying overhead. Just that whole thing showed me that the president is serious about what's going on. But Putin is a really good liar right to your face. He'll say, yeah, absolutely, we're doing an agreement. That'll be great. That he bombs another apartment complex in Ukraine. How much did you read out of what happened that day? Did it appear as though Putin was, in fact, telling the truth and he wants to end this thing?
Well, he wants to end it, but he wants to end it on Russia's terms, or
Yeah,
to the point, to Putin's terms. And so I think why he showed up then in Alaska was because he was under very real pressure or potential cost, because Trump was threatening secondary sanctions on his biggest benefactors, the Chinese, and then his second biggest customer for Russian oil in India. And the fear was, I think, in Moscow, is that he's going to have a real hard time keeping the money and the material flowing in to sustain his war effort. And
right.
that's why he showed up. But he hasn't had to deliver anything because the consequences haven't been made very clear and felt by him yet. So until secondary sanctions are fully enforced, until there's actually changes on the battlefield, there's some indication the Ukrainians might be launching a new missile offensive with new weapons that they've built. Until those two things happen, there's no reason to think that Putin's going to willingly come in good faith negotiating into this war at this stage.
It's Brent Sadler from the Heritage Foundation, heritage.org. It's interesting. The India component, I think, is very interesting. You probably can explain this way better than I could. But wasn't it the last administration that cut off the LNG going across the pond and cutting our resources and energy going to places like India that almost forced India to have to go to Russia to get its oil and get its energy? They couldn't just not have any energy. It appears to me that Joe Biden and that administration, or the Autopen, whoever it was, made really bad decisions that somehow empowered Russia and allowed them to continue this. Did I read that wrong, or is that right?
No, it's actually worse. In the last administration, it was run by ideologues and activists, not people that were interested in what's in the best interest of the United States and American citizens. Because if they had been, they would have realized that their policies of trying to turn off or to work towards carbon zero was all of a sudden bankrupt when the world no longer could afford to continue buying Russian oil if they wanted to end the first war since World War II in Europe. And so the only way we could have solved this problem, and this includes with the Indians, is to provide another alternative and to put more American petroleum and LNG on the market. And unfortunately, that wasn't an option that the Biden administration was willing to take. And it's going to take some time before we get our capacity and the ability to move that petroleum to market at this stage.
It's all such a very, very strange situation because we had the LNG deal with the EU. Trump literally said, I'm not going to protect you from him if you're buying energy from him. So they stopped buying energy from him. Then Biden shuts down the terminals in Louisiana, and he tells Mike Johnson he didn't realize he shut off the terminals. I thought I just signed to do a study. No, they shut off the terminals. So the ideologues, I agree with you. They were in place for 4 straight years. But they allowed for Russia to enrich itself. They also said they were supporting Ukraine. Brent, it's almost like, and I don't make any assumptions, tell me if you agree here, it's almost like they wanted to empower and enrich both sides to keep this thing going because they thought war would somehow help our economy. Is there anything to that, do you think?
No, again, I think it's actually, the truth is much worse than that. The folks that were making these decisions in the Biden administration didn't think beyond simply addressing either their very close circle, social circles, and their own their own ideology. That was all that they were calculating and thinking about. It was not about, you know, preventing or ending a war in Europe that's threatening American interest or bettering the lives of American citizens. It was over this fear or objective of reaching some carbon zero goal.
Right.
Damn the cost and damn the consequences.
Yeah, but carbon zero for us doesn't mean that Brazil is carbon zero, doesn't mean that India is, or Russia is, or China is. Did they think that we were on a separate planet? Because if you allowed everywhere else and actually empower, incentivize other places to do energy, you're not making a cleaner world. Just they wanted the air over our country to be somehow pristine or different. It doesn't. Does that make sense? It's not a. It's literally a zero sum game. It's the same world. And if you're polluting it from the other side of the world, it doesn't make us any better here. They just wanted to be able to say that they were.
No, they were technically not very competent in this regard.
Okay. Well, I agree.
Obviously the world is a connected system, but the other part of this is American energy production. So if you're going to buy gasoline for the car, you're going to get LNG. The way the United States brings it out of the earth and then processes, refines it, is a lot cleaner than anywhere else in the world. So if the world still needs petroleum and you're worried about carbon emissions and you want a more cleaner world, you would preferentially bias yourself to buying American sourced, American refined energy. But they did the opposite thing. They were incentivizing the worst offenders in the dirtiest methods of extracting and refining that product on the market. So again,
dumb.
Yeah, it's just not very smart.
Brent Sadler, go and get his book. It's called Naval Power in Action. Is our Navy up to snuff? Is our Navy what it needs to be? Are we keeping pace or still ahead of China, or have they passed us? What is the naval situation for the United States military?
Yeah. Well, thanks for mentioning the book. It's the second one that's out, and it's all about, frustration of like we have very little time to deter China. We're not really doing it right now. The Navy that we have is as ready as it can be, but it's also a function of having ships and munitions and aircraft in numbers that are also ready, and we don't have those numbers. So we're starting to find that we're exposing areas where we otherwise would have been present to cover urgent crisis, say against the Houthis or the Iranians, when we're seeing the Chinese increasingly take some very bold risk, like they just did, and they had a mistake, a little red on red incident when they try to use a destroyer to ram a Philippine patrol vessel, and they actually hit one of their own Coast Guard ships, probably killed a few sailors, Chinese sailors in the process. So the Navy doesn't have the capacity. Our shipyards have been allowed to atrophy because of mismanagement and not having adequate orders over the last 30 years. And it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time to get back to where we need to be. So we're going to have to think creatively in the immediacy. And again, that's why that book was written, to try to trigger that action, because we don't have the luxury of time.
Naval Power in Action. Go and get the book for sure. How long does it take to build a big naval ship? I mean, I'm sure there are different ships and different sizes and whatever, but in general, is that, because you said it's going to take a lot of time. I mean, we have the money, and as the economy gets better, we'll continue to have the money. How much time does it take?
Well, conventionally, right now, if you just kept building the way we always do, 3 to 5 years.
Oh, wow.
On the best of times, which is too long. So the Navy we have now is the Navy we're going to fight with, which really means the focus has got to be expanding our capacity to build ships and getting some of the smaller unmanned ones out there that can carry a lot more weapons on them, but disaggregated, dispersed. So we can actually, in the next year or two, get more firepower to sea as our shipbuilding capacity picks up, and we actually can build naval ships faster. We can do better than 3 years for a destroyer, for sure.
What do you think the progressive administrations like Obama and like Biden, what do you think their goal was? To make us weaker? They didn't want us to be the military strength that we'd always been? It appeared to me as though they wanted to make it more woke. They wanted to have more drag shows at army bases. They wanted to have more, trans or gay people talk about being trans and gay instead of focusing on the job, which is winning wars. Can you think of a reason? I mean, militarily and strategically, there's no reason why they did it. But can you think of a reason why these progressive administrations wanted to make us weaker?
Well, I think they were activists. First and foremost, they weren't thinking through the consequences of their policies or their decisions, and they quite frankly didn't care about the priority. Certainly wasn't the betterment of the American population and protecting of American interest. They were more committed to their ideology or their worldview than they were to America. And that's
And what
probably
is
about
that?
the
What is that
simplest.
worldview? That we're also Iran? That we're not exceptional? What is their worldview? What is that?
I think their worldview was, it depends on who the activist. If it was the trans activist, it's one in which if you declare yourself a certain gender, then that is the reality. And that's all they care about. The other things are a distant second. If you are an activist that's against all nuclear weapons, then it doesn't matter that the Russians and the Chinese develop them. You have in a position of power in the US government. Now you're enabled to actually defund and prevent any investment in the nuclear enterprise. And today we have a problem where we cannot sustain our nuclear arsenal, and we lose that nuclear deterrent. We are in a world of hurt.
Senior Research Fellow, Naval Warfare and Advanced Technology, Brent Sadler from the Heritage Foundation. Go get his book called Naval Power in Action. Had Trump not won, would China have invaded Taiwan?
I don't think they were ready. They're getting really close. And the unfortunate thing is, unlike Putin in Ukraine, had Trump been in office back in 2022, it's very likely Putin would have thought twice about invading Ukraine for a host of reasons. The Chinese aren't deterred. And what's been clear since Trump's come into office, they have not changed their behavior. So with China, it's a lot more dangerous. And I think we have to think what additional actions that are going to have to be taken by this new administration. Certainly, this administration under President Trump is not shy about exercising American power to serve Americans' interest. I think it's probably time to start trying some new things with the Chinese. Secondary sanctions, well past due, might get Putin's attention, but it might also get the Chinese attention too.
It's all very interesting because President Xi was at Mar-a-Lago in the first administration when Trump said, hey, enjoy your dessert. I'm going to go drop some bombs on Syria. And he did. And Russia took note of that because Russians were killed there. China took note of that. This guy's serious. He will do it even over dessert. Does that dissuade him at all? Or does China have just a different worldview where we think Taiwan is ours? We're going to do it whether he's in office or not?
Yeah, it comes down to how big is President Trump's stick? It's not a question of will he use it with the Chinese. And so they know that Trump will use the military and economic tools if he gets pushed to that point. The problem with the Chinese is they're not deterred by that anymore. And that's a real danger for us.
So the way that we deter them is economically?
It's a combination. We have to strengthen our military. We have to operate our military in new ways that'll actually cause the Chinese to start doubting themselves and their capability. And we also need to exercise economic statecraft very aggressively. And then finally, one of our biggest advantages is a network of partnerships and allies. And I'd focus in on the treaty allies where we have mutual defense agreements. These are the relationships that we need to start encouraging and exciting to do and take more actions themselves. It only took Putin invading Ukraine to finally get the Europeans to wake up out of their peaceful slumber, post-Cold War peaceful slumber. Asia has been awake to the China threat, but they haven't taken enough actions, and now it's their time to act.
Has the West been, by the way, the name of the book is Naval Power in Action, Naval Power in Action. His name is Brent Sadler. Go and get the book. Has the West been just asleep or apathetic about China taking over ports? I have people in Italy. They say entire ports are run and managed by Chinese nationals. They speak Chinese. The whole area in that part of Italy is now like a little China. Have we been just sort of quiet and in a slumber, allowing them to do anything they want in the West? There's no way we could go and open some ports. Sadler and Pags can't go to China today and open a port and just say, yeah, we're going to speak English here. It's an American port now. Have we been too quiet and too complacent, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, the Europeans are a different level. I mean, they honestly thought by engaging and buying oil and tying their economies while they defunded their military to where they couldn't even defend themselves. Germany couldn't even muster a division of armor, in the day after Putin's invasion in 2022 of Ukraine. So the Europeans now have been awoken, but they were really like negligent in their own defense. Now they're changing, but it's going to take a lot of time and it's going to take a lot of money on their part, and they're still not there. In Asia, because they're right next to China, I don't think they were disillusioned or unaware of what China was and what the threat. They just knew they couldn't take them on themselves, so they were trying to balance.
Right.
And for the last 15 years or so, many of those countries have spent a fair amount of money on defense. Not all of them, but it's not pacing the China threat. The United States is in somewhere in the middle, kind of bouncing around between, thinking that everything is fine and we can balance and we can partner with the Chinese. That's Obama era. A little bit of the first year or two of Biden administration. To they are a competitor, not a rival, where we can actually start to compete, but not where we have to break the bank
Right.
or to really put a lot of hard energy, put our back into strengthening our military again. The reality is the Chinese aren't deterred with what we got today.
Senior research fellow, Heritage Foundation, is Brent Sadler. Get his book called Naval Power in Action. How does the Middle East situation end? Does Israel take over Gaza? I don't know that they're going to find all of Hamas, and we still want the hostages back. What happens there, do you think, in about 30 seconds, which isn't a whole lot, because I do want to finish up on Russia, Ukraine again. But what happens there now?
Well, the destruction of Hamas is unnegotiable. I think that's also in America's interest, and I think the Israelis are going to do that. And when you look beyond the protest and you actually hear the Israelis talk, they do not see a future for Hamas in Gaza either, despite the protests where they want their hostages back too.
Yeah, it's a hard situation. So do they occupy Gaza again? Do they offer it to Egypt? What happens to that strip of land?
I think it's an Israeli occupation where they actually turn over gradually to a Palestinian entity that they can trust to live peacefully next to. It's going to take a long time to get to that, though.
It would be nice if we could get some peace in that region. Last question. Let's circle back to Russia, Ukraine. So are the steps in place now? Do you see a ceasefire, some sort of a land swap? Russia's not going to give up the Russian ethnic, eastern part. I don't see them giving that up. But you also want to feel like Ukraine's getting something. How does that end?
Well, the key thing is a line of control. That's where you freeze the front line. And the key thing is to make sure that whatever's agreed in that immediate phase is not the final solution of territory, but the immediacy where they freeze the fighting. It has to be defensible. It cannot put the Ukrainians in an indefensible position, which is what Putin's been asking for. When he says, give me all of the Donbass, Luhansk and Donetsk, that would cede 5 heavily fortified cities that the Russians have yet to be able to breach.
Right.
Take that out, it weakens the Ukrainians. So we have to be very careful about how we go forward. And I honestly don't see the Russians right now being compelled to come to the negotiating table. And the fighting will actually subside towards the end of September when the rains hit and you get this historically horrible mud that'll slow the fighting down just by act of God and Mother Nature.
And then hit them with the sanctions, the second level sanctions, and maybe they'll stop?
Yes, I think
Okay.
that is the more likely future that we'll see. I think it's much more likely that if sanctions are put in place in the near future, the fighting starts to subside just by nature's intervention.
Yeah.
Then that's when Putin might be compelled to come to the table in real seriousness towards the end of September and into October.
It's certainly time now. It's Brent Sadler. Go and check him out, heritage.org. Get this book called Naval Power in Action. Appreciate the time and the knowledge. Thank you so much, Brent.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, you too. We're back after this. Stay right here.